All right, we'll get started. Hello and welcome. Welcome to the Montana Department of Commerce Community Technical Assistance Program's second ARPA training, focused on the ARPA Water and Sewer Grant Program. This meeting is being recorded and will be available at a later date, both on our website and also on the DNRC ARPA Water and Sewer website. My name is Cody Ferguson. I'm the Community Planning Program Manager here at the Community Development Division of the Department of Commerce. I'm joined by Rachel Clark, our Division Engineer, Gus Byram, Outreach Coordinator, Alicia Olerman, our ARPA Outreach Specialist, and Rebecca Shaw-Quinones, our Planning Program Specialist. This team works with our partners at the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation and the Department of Environmental Quality to help your communities prepare eligible ARPA water and sewer applications and to identify funding sources to make vital improvements in water and sewer infrastructure across the state. If you have any questions, please hold them off to the end and put them in the Q&A part of the Zoom meeting. You see the little Q&A button at the bottom, open that up and you can put your question in there. And when we get done with the presentation, then we'll jump into Q&A. I expect that our presentation will be 30 to 45 minutes at most, and then we should have plenty of time to get to most, if not all, the questions today. The objective of this training is to help you understand the scoring process for the competitive grant program so you can prepare and submit eligible and competitive grant applications for the second round of competitive grant funding. The deadline for that second round is January 14th, so roughly 2 months away. If you're new to or unfamiliar with Montana's ARPA Water and Sewer Grant Program, we recommend that you visit the DNRC ARPA website at ARPA-MTDNRC-HUB-ARCGIS.com, and that link there in red, and click on the Looking for Training button at the bottom of the screen, and then view either the Montana Department of Commerce ARPA training dated June 14th, 2021, or the Montana Rural Water ARPA presentation dated May 21st, 2021 by Anna Miller, or any of the other trainings that are there. There are lots of trainings and resources available on that site. If you're an irrigator, you may know that the Infrastructure Advisory Commission created an irrigation grant program for the second competitive round. We encourage you to watch one of these earlier overview trainings and then attend the training for the irrigator grant program this Friday on November 12th. I believe that will also be recorded, likely be recorded, and be available on the ARPA DNRC website at a later date. More information is available on that training and can be found by going to arpa.mt.gov and clicking water and sewer. Right, next slide, please. So since we offered our first training in June, we've completed one competitive grant cycle and dozens of communities have applied for minimum allocation grants. And so I just wanted to talk through a few of the things we've learned since beginning the program that will be valuable in preparing your application and understanding what to expect in the second application cycle. The first thing we learned is the need for this money is greater than we ever imagined. We, internally we talked about how many applications we might receive in the first round and just what the total need was for water and sewer infrastructure across the state. But I don't think any of us anticipated exactly the number or the great need that was expressed in that first cycle. We had about 320 applications in that first cycle, totaling grant request of almost 860 million for an available pot of money of only 250 million. If you added the total amount that those 320 grant applications, the total project amounts, we would have been looking at billions of dollars. So huge need across the state. And that taught us some lessons about, what would be competitive in the next cycle, and hopefully will help you making decisions in how you put together your competitive grant applications, or whether you decide to submit for the competitive cycle in round 2, or maybe find some other funding options to get your project done. Maybe apply for the minimum allocation grant, or start thinking through some other funding options. One of the things we learned that although a project might be eligible, what's competitive is another question. And so the federal government directs us to use the guidelines for the drinking water and the clean water state revolving fund programs to score projects for funding. This heavily advantages projects that clearly address the greatest danger to or risk to public health and the environment, and unfortunately disadvantages important projects that do not intersect that public health or the environment in the same way. For this reason, irrigation projects, though they were eligible and though many applications were submitted that were for important projects and were well done applications in that first round, many of them scored too low to be funded in the first round. And this is why the Infrastructure Advisory Commission decided to carve out $10 million just for irrigation projects with a maximum grant amount of $500,000 per project in the second round. Also, though that House Bill 632 set the original limit for competitive grants at $25 million, the Infrastructure Advisory Commission opted to spread the money as widely as possible throughout the state and have the greatest impact. So they capped competitive grant awards at $2 million in the first round. They'll be capped at $2 million in the second round. That enabled the program to fund roughly 75 projects in that first round versus about 30. And we'll see what happens in the second round, but we would anticipate that with there being about $110, $115 million left to award in the second round, there'll be maybe 50, 60 projects, non-irrigation projects that are awarded, and then however many irrigation projects can be awarded within that $10 million set aside. Lastly, the Infrastructure Advisory Commission decided that if a project was awarded a grant in the first round, it can't reapply for that same project in the second round. So for instance, if it applied for more than a $2 million grant in the first round, but was awarded $2 million grant, they can't apply for the remainder of that grant request in the second round to try to spread the money out as broadly across the state as possible and make the greatest impact. If after this training and calculating your scores for your own project, and after talking to us over here at the Department of Commerce and folks at the DNRC, you realize that your project, while eligible, might not be competitive. There might not be a way for it to climb up into the top 50, 60 projects. You might consider applying only for your minimum allocation grant. With that, you could do a preliminary engineering report if that's something that you need, and prepare yourself to apply for other sources of funding in 2022, either for a Montana Coal Endowment program grant or a renewable resource grant loan program grant, or for money that might be coming, we think is likely to be coming from a big federal infrastructure bill that passed the House a few days ago, and we'll see how that progresses. But use this money, don't leave it on the table. There are different ways that you can use the ARPA Water and Sewer money if you don't get a competitive grant, or if you think your project might not be competitive. There are other ways to more strategically focus your efforts, and we're happy to help walk you through that between now and January 14th. If that's if your project maybe doesn't, if we think it's not going to be competitive. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel Clark, our division engineer with the Community Development Division, and she's going to walk us through the scoring process for the competitive grant program.
Thanks, Cody. The competitive grant ranking gives points in 4 different areas: public health and safety, match, affordability, and readiness to proceed. The overall ranking structure is the same regardless of the project type and hasn't changed from the first round of grants. As you can see, public health and safety makes up 70% of the total score, so that is where we're going to concentrate today. If you want additional information on competitive grant ranking, you can go to arpa.mt.gov, click on Water and Sewer, and then the Competitive Grant Program, Application Guidance, and ranking is in Appendix C. If you're applying for a state capital project, those have a slightly different ranking scheme for match and affordability. First, we'll talk about the public health and safety criteria for water projects. Water projects have 7 different ranking categories, which are separated into documented versus potential health risks, acute versus non-acute contaminants, whether you're taking proactive measures to ensure compliance, are consolidating systems, or are proposing conservation measures. And we'll talk about each of these categories separately. The first public health and safety ranking criteria is documented acute health risks. There's only 2 sources of acute health risks under the Safe Drinking Water Act. The first is microbials like bacteria, viruses, cryptosporidium, and giardia. The second is nitrogen. Those are the only 2 sources of acute health risks, so you can't get points under this category for other contaminants like lead and copper or volatile organics or anything else. Documented means you have received a violation letter or some other type of notice from DEQ. So to get points in this category, you need to have one of the 4 things on this list: 2 or more boil water orders in the last 2 years, a surface water rule treatment technique violation, a groundwater under the direct influence of surface water sources that have not yet installed treatment, or a nitrate or nitrite maximum contaminant level violation. If you're a public water system and you have one of these problems, you are 100% going to know about it, because DEQ is going to tell you you have this problem, probably in the form of a violation letter. Later in the presentation, we'll talk about areas where you might be able to increase your public health and safety points, but this category is not really the place to do it because it's entirely prescriptive. Either you have one of these 4 things or you don't. The second water ranking category is documented non-acute health risks. Non-acute health risks are all of the other regulated contaminants under the Safe Drinking Water Act and bacteria problems that haven't risen to the point they're an imminent health threat. Again, documented means you have a violation letter from DEQ or some other correspondence from them. So for documented non-acute health risks, you need to have one of the problems on this list, and that's 2 or more revised total coliform rule assessments in the last 2 years, positive E. coli samples that haven't risen to boil water orders yet, a treatment technique violation of the groundwater rule or the Montana chlorination rule, an action level exceedance MCL violation or treatment technique violation of the chemical and radiological contaminant rules, or a significant deficiency identified in a sanitary survey. Again, if you're a public water system with one of these problems, you're going to know about it because DEQ is going to tell you, probably in the form of a violation letter. This category is also pretty cut and dried. Either you have one of the 5 things on this list or you don't. The next criteria for water projects is potential acute health risks, and this is an area where you might be able to improve your score. You can get 50 points for any one of these 4 issues, but you can't get more than 50 points if you happen to have several of them. If you have a hydraulic analysis or model of your system and there are areas in distribution where pressures routinely fall below 35 psi or 20 psi at the customer's house, you can get 50 points. Or if you have documented line breaks or leaks, and most water systems do, you can also qualify under this category. If you don't have a documented cross-control program, that also works. A cross-connection control program helps to prevent backflow of contamination into the public water system by things like backflow prevention devices and homeowner education. And finally, if you have nitrate or nitrite above 5 milligrams per liter, but less than 10 milligrams per liter, that also qualifies for this category. Next up is potential non-acute health risks. This is another category where you might be able to improve your score. You can get up to 30 points under this category if you have either chemical defects that are more than 75% of the MCL set by EPA or documented lead service lines. Lots and lots of water systems have lead service lines. So if you've documented several, include that in your application and you can get these points. Next is two more water categories: proactive compliance for up to 50 points and consolidation for 30 points. For proactive compliance, if you are, for example, adding a new treatment process to comply with current or proposed EPA rules, that's 50 points. If you're under a formal state or federal enforcement action, that's 25 points. Consolidation means you're connecting two or more systems to resolve a compliance issue. For example, if you're a public water system and you have high arsenic and you connect to another public water system with low arsenic water so you can blend those sources and achieve compliance with the MCL, that qualifies as consolidation. Also, if you have an area where existing individual wells have issues like high nitrates, and you're making a new community public water system to solve that issue, that qualifies as consolidation and you get 30 points. And finally, for water, we have conservation, and you can get points in all three of these areas if you qualify. Water conservation means the use of improved technologies or practices to deliver equal or better service with less water. So that could be replacing leaky distribution pipe or storage tanks or conducting water audits. If you have water meters in your community or you're proposing meters with the project you're applying for, that's 20 points. And energy conservation means new pumps or treatment processes or rehabbing existing processes to become more energy efficient. Energy conservation also includes renewable energy projects at a water treatment plant or a utility energy management study. So those are all the criteria for public health and safety water projects, which total up to 420 points. Now we'll move on to public health and safety ranking for wastewater. Wastewater only has 4 different ranking categories, also totaling 420 points, but 2 of the 4 criteria have multiple ways to get points. The wastewater ranking categories are public health protection, water quality improvements, effectiveness, and point or non-point sources. Before we get into the wastewater ranking criteria, we first need to discuss some terms used in the application that might be unfamiliar. We don't have enough time today to cover all the details for each of these terms, but I wanted to at least help people get familiar with them. DEQ is going to provide further information on how to determine beneficial uses and TMDLs at the irrigation training on November 12th. So we encourage people to attend that training too if you're proposing a wastewater project. The first term is beneficial uses. DEQ has designated beneficial uses for all water bodies in the state based on their ability to be used for 5 different purposes: as drinking water, agricultural water, irrigation water, water used to support aquatic life, and water used for recreation like swimming. A TMDL is the maximum amount of a particular pollutant that a water body can receive and still maintain its designated beneficial uses. So for example, Creek XYZ might have a TMDL of 9 pounds a day for total nitrogen. A point source is a source of pollutants that is not diffuse, like a wastewater treatment plant that discharges to a stream. A non-point source is defined by EPA quite literally as anything that's not a point source. So on-site septic systems for residences that eventually discharge to groundwater are non-point sources. And finally, nutrients and nitrogen or nitrogen and phosphorus that are discharged to a water body. Now on to wastewater ranking. The first category for wastewater is public health protection for 75 points. This is an all or nothing category, and examples include protecting a public drinking water source from leaking lagoons or pipes or an on-site system, establishing conservation easements to protect a drinking water source, projects that help minimize sewage backups into homes, projects that protect operators from safety hazards, or projects that eliminate surfacing sewage. The next wastewater criteria is project effectiveness, which is a graduated category, meaning you get more points for projects that do more to improve water quality. For the maximum of 100 points, you need to demonstrate that your project will eliminate health hazards or restore a local water body to fully supporting all beneficial uses, which we talked about earlier. Some examples of that are if all or most septic tanks in an area are being replaced by sewer, if a water body is impaired for nutrients due to a wastewater treatment plant discharge, and total retention or spray irrigation is being proposed. If you don't meet that top criteria, you can get 50 points for any project that directly improves the quality of ground or surface water, but may not fully restore all uses. Some examples of that are stormwater retention to prevent runoff from reaching sediment impacted streams, infiltration and inflow correction to eliminate sewer overflows, or replacement of failing lift stations. And at the bottom is 25 points for projects that are primarily designed to improve infrastructure, but may not have a direct impact on water quality. An example of that would be replacing old collection systems. Next up is for public health and safety wastewater is water quality. This category has 6 pieces, and you can get points for each piece up to a total of 175 points. If the purpose of the project is to reduce toxic effects to aquatic life, like ammonia or metals in surface water, that's 25 points. If the purpose is to reduce sediment loading to a surface water body, like channeling stormwater runoff to settling ponds, that's another 25 points. Also, if the purpose is to reduce nutrients in a surface water body, that's another 25 points. An example of that is replacing failing septic tanks or sewering an area. And if the project is for compliance with national secondary standards, that's another 25 points. National secondary standards are for total suspended solids, biological oxygen demand, and pH. So if you're, for example, adding aeration to reduce BOD, that would qualify for 25 points. If your system is under a formal DEQ or EPA enforcement order, that will get you another 25 points. And finally, if the proposed project is to help meet a TMDL, that's 50 points. Again, TMDL is the total maximum daily load of a pollutant a water body can receive and still support all of its designated beneficial uses. As we discussed earlier, wastewater projects are separated into point and non-point sources, and there are different questions to answer depending on which type of project you have. And you can't mix and match and try to get points in both point source and non-point source categories. For point sources, there are 5 different categories, and you can get points in each. If one of your treatment processes is nearing or has reached capacity, you get 10 points for that. If something in your system is no longer reliable or obsolete, and that's impacting the treatment process, that's 20 points. And this could be something like repairing a leaking lagoon liner or sewer main replacements. If your project will reduce your discharge and you can put the wastewater or sludge to a beneficial use, like spray irrigation to grow crops, that's another 20 points. You can get 10 points if you have water meters installed on your system. if you have an I&I reduction program, or if I&I is less than 20%. And I&I is shorthand for inflow and infiltration, and that means groundwater or stormwater entering into your sewer system. And finally, you can get 10 points if your project reduces energy consumption or includes energy reducing principles. Under non-point source projects, you can also qualify for 70 points. You get 20 points if your project will improve water use efficiency. An example would be if you're going from flood irrigation to a center pivot. You can get 25 points if the project has beneficial uses in addition to water quality protection, such as promoting wildlife habitat. Examples of that include projects designed to increase in-stream flows to protect aquatic life or stream bank restoration. You can also get 25 points for your non-point source project if the primary purpose is to protect water quality and public health. An example of that might be sewering an area with on-site systems to protect a drinking water supply. And so those are all the categories for wastewater projects, also for a total of 420 points. And now I'm going to turn it over to Gus Byram, Outreach Coordinator here at Commerce, to go over readiness to proceed, affordability, and match.
All right. So Cody, can you, all right, if everyone can hear me? All right. Readiness to proceed is the easiest way to get points. You can see 80 points are possible looking at the screen. So for instance, have you hired an engineer? You get points for that, 10 points. Are your planning documents complete? For instance, your PER, your preliminary engineering report, your capital improvements plan, or other similar documents. That's more points, as you see illustrated there on the slide. While ARPA requires that a contract for construction be completed by December 31st, 2026, DNRC will also give you more points if you demonstrate construction can begin within 24 months. 30 points. All right, now the next slide, affordability. 50 points are possible. So this is also considered in the application. And you'll see three basic approaches to affordability. So the first two of these methods uses your water and sewer user rates versus your community's MHI or median household income. So as an example, if your local median household income is $60,000 per year, which equals $5,000 per month, 60,000 divided by 12, and your combined, like looking at the left side, the column on the left side, and your combined monthly water and sewer rates are $100. $100 divided by 5,000 equals 0.02 or 2%. So looking at that slide on the left, you fall within the 2% bracket, and then you would get 15 points for affordability. Or looking at the column in the middle, if you have for a single water or sewer rate only, a single utility rather than combined. So if your local median household income is $50,000 per year, for instance, in an example, that equals $4,167 per month. Again, 50,000 divided by 12, and your monthly rates then are $75. So 75 divided by 4,167 equals 1.8%. So looking at that column in the middle, 1.8, you would then get 25 points. Again, in this example, for a single utility, either water or sewer. Then, if your project is something different than water or sewer systems, like an irrigation project, for example, you would use the last method, which is illustrated on the right-hand column, which is your local MHI or median household income versus the statewide MHI. Based on the most recent census data, which is available on the web, on the ARPA website, Montana's statewide MHI is 54,970. So if your local MHI For instance, of the people served by the irrigation project, in other words, for that community there, is $20,000. 20,000 divided by 54,970 equals a 0.36 or 36%. So you are less than 75%. So you would get 50 points for affordability. So in this case, you've got a pretty low community MHI. You get more points for affordability. So if your local MHI is $50,000, so 50,000 divided by 54,970, the statewide MHI, you're running at 91% of MHI. You would get, looking at the chart, you'll get 25 points. So you're almost up to the statewide figure. Now, in the case where if your local MHI is 60,000, 60,000 divided by 54,970 is 109%. So your community income is over the statewide MHI. So you'll get the lower points or the 10 points. All right, now we'll go on to match. All right. So discussing match, House Bill 632 states that local governments are required to provide matching funds to be eligible for grants. For competitive grants, the bill states that preference may be given to projects that provide a higher match rate. The legislature was clear during crafting of House Bill 632 that they expected local governments to leverage local funds to maximize the impact of ARPA dollars in our state. Ranking for match will constitute 50 points or 8% of the total project score. The Infrastructure Commission and the agencies involved want to ensure that funding is distributed equally across the state and that needs of small rural communities can effectively compete with larger urban applicants who may have more resources available. Ensuring an equitable match ranking methodology is an important factor to achieve this goal. In hopes of meeting this goal, there are two methodologies that are used to calculate match points, and that's what's illustrated on the slide. You will be awarded points from whichever method gives your project the most points. Okay, the first method, which is illustrated on the left side, the first method awards points equal to the project match percentage compared to the local ARPA dollars available to the local government. So that's a combination of your local fiscal recovery funds plus your minimum allocation grant up to 50% match or 50 points. For smaller communities with relatively small amounts of local fiscal recovery funds and minimum grant and minimum allocation grant eligibility compared to the state's largest cities, this calculation may be beneficial depending upon the size of the project. For local governments applying for competitive grants that are not receiving local fiscal recovery funds or minimum allocation grants, for example, water and sewer districts, school districts, irrigation districts, or conservation districts, the applicable county's ARPA funds will be used to calculate the percent match. Now on method 2 on the right-hand side, the second method is a simple calculation of amount of match compared to the total project cost up to 50%. This method may be beneficial for larger communities that received a larger amount of local fiscal recovery funds and have greater minimum allocation grant eligibility, depending on the total cost of the project. And then I'm going to go to the next slide about growth. And you can see in the illustration there, we say, no growth, no fire flow. And what we mean by that is that only reasonably expected growth can be funded in an ARPA water and sewer grant. An ARPA water and sewer grant cannot fund water or sewer mains or distribution lines or treatment for developments that do not yet exist. And if a water project is mostly to provide for or increase fire flows, it is ineligible. Fire flow can be part of a project, but it cannot constitute the majority of the project. If fire flow is part of your project, make it clear how much of your project it constitutes and that it's less than 50%. And now I'm going to turn it over to Alicia Allerman, our ARPA program specialist here at the Department of Commerce, to talk about how to access technical assistance.
Thanks, Gus. My name's Alicia Olerman, and here in the Community Technical Assistance Program, we have a team of 5 ready to help. Gus Byram, Rebecca Shaw-Quinones, Rachel Clark, Cody Ferguson, and myself. We can provide technical support in a few different ways for your ARPA Water and Sewer grant applications. First off, if you applied during the first round but did not receive funding for your project, you can contact us to set up a debrief or review meeting to go over your scoring in the first round. We can provide you with details such as where you received points, how you were ranked in the first round, and recommendations for the second round if you choose to resubmit. And also, if you did not submit during the first round, but would still like assistance with anything such as eligibility, ARPA grant questions, or general help with application, please feel free to contact us as well. Second, we have created an engineering pool to help with up to 20 hours of ARPA grant application preparation paid through ARPA funding. And we are assigning these on a case-by-case basis, depending on the situation of the community in need. If you feel like you could use this assistance in the next round, just reach out to us and we will determine if you qualify for the program. The easiest way to contact us is to go to our webpage, arpa.mt.gov, and click on the big red Contact Us button. And our typical response time is less than 24 hours. Next slide.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I think that ends our formal presentation. Now we can get on to question and answer. I know I saw some hands raised. I'm not sure if there are any questions in the Q&A box or in the chat, but I'll turn it over to Rebecca.
Great. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for sending in questions. Just a few, but firstly, how can we find this training and will the PowerPoint be available by itself? Please review.
So you can find this training and other trainings if you go to arpa.mt.gov and then click on the water and sewer button. That'll take you to the DNRC ARPA Water and Sewer site. And then there's a link there that says looking for training. And when you click on that, all the trainings that have been recorded, which will eventually include this one, will be available on that site. Alternatively, you can also go to the Montana Department of Commerce site, and this will be posted on our site as well. But the best place to find all the trainings is on that DNRC ARPA Water and Sewer site.
Thank you. Let's see, next question. I have a community that is planning both water and sewer improvements in the same area, and they would like to bid it as one project. Should they prepare one ARPA application for the project, or should they prepare an application for the water and sewer project separately, since there are different ARPA applications for both? If they prepare separate applications, will they be allowed to bid as one project? And I can parse that out if need be.
I can take that one. So they are welcome to submit it in one application or 2 applications, and they have to answer all the questions, both for water and for sewer, and they will receive the highest number of points whether that's water or sewer. So it's up to you how you want to submit it.
Thank you, Rachel. Does stormwater fall under the project other than water sewer, or is it sewer stormwater?
It depends on what kind of a stormwater project it is. If it's stormwater improvements to help protect water quality, that would be in sewer. Like can't think of a situation where it would be a water project unless it was specifically associated with a water treatment plant.
Okay. Regarding growth issue, does this mean that a project will, among other issues, reach to an already approved subdivision, qualify for funding versus wanting to expand the system to accommodate proposed growth? Can I read that again?
Reasonable growth is eligible for communities. That's eligible for ARPA funding. Reasonable growth might be really different in Havre versus Belgrade, so it needs to accommodate that whatever is reasonable. You know, I'd look at your census data, how much has it, how much has your population increased since the 2010 census, things like that.
Okay. If a community submitted a competitive grant in the first round and was not funded, will they need to fill out and sign a new ARPA Water and Sewer infrastructure grant certification form?
I believe they will, but if Autumn or Anna who are on this line, oh, Autumn just said yes, they will.
Okay, good. That is all the questions that were raised. If anyone has questions, please put them in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. I don't see any more coming in.
Wow, I guess
Soon.
we've
Wait,
been
there's one more.
okay.
Is there a downside to submitting a competitive application and also submit requests for minimum allocation at the same time in case the competitive grant is not awarded, or is that too confusing?
So I think they said they were gonna submit both competitive and minimum allocation at the same time. And what happens if the competitive is not funded? Was that the question?
Correct.
So then if you still want to go forward with the project, you're going to have to scale it down or find other sources of funding to offset what you requested in the competitive grant.
But if the question is, you know, essentially trying to play your odds and submit a competitive grant at the same time that you submit a minimum allocation grant in case you don't get the competitive grant, I would say only apply for the competitive grant, wait for the results of that, and then apply for your minimum allocation grant. Because I do think that'll get too confusing. Does that make sense, Rachel?
Yes.
Okay. And also your competitive grant will probably include your minimum allocation grant. And I'm just thinking on the reviewer side of things. And then of course, you know, when DNRC packages things up to make recommendations to the Infrastructure Advisory Commission, I think having that minimum allocation committed in two different grant applications, so one in the competitive and one as a standalone minimum allocation that's not the same application, I think would get too confusing.
Sure.
If you were awarded a competitive grant in the first round for a water project for phase 1, can you apply for a water project grant for phase 2?
You can apply for another competitive grant as long as it wasn't included in the first round project that you submitted. Yes.
Okay, I got something that came in the chat. For anybody out there, if you want a question, try and put it in Q&A. Let me get this question up. We are working on the design of 2 projects at a wastewater treatment plant. We are planning to bid it as one bid package, with each project element being a separate bid item. One project element will pursue SRF funding, and the other we are planning to apply for the second round of ARPA funding. If successful on the ARPA funds, do you see an issue with this bidding arrangement? The work items are distinctly different and costs would be tracked separately. We just preferred to bid them together with the hope to get the attention of general contractors.
I don't see a problem with that. Is there anybody from DEQ on the line? Or perhaps Anna might have an answer for how you would, you're going to have to track and report those separately. So it might be a logistical issue, but it's not something that's prohibited.
And Autumn replied, that's not a problem. Excellent. Other questions out there? Three, two, one. Okay, Cody.
Well, thank you so much. I was going to say earlier, I mean, maybe we finally saturated everybody with enough trainings. There aren't any more questions, but if you do have questions, feel free, to contact us. Use that red button on the arpa.np.gov website. That's the easiest, quickest way. Yeah, thank you so much for taking time to attend the training. And we look forward to seeing applications and also look forward to talking to you soon if you need any assistance. So thank you so much. And with that, I think we'll stop this training, stop recording.
Thank you.
Yep.